was in Auckland, sitting at work, doing my software stuff, and the first I heard about it was on Twitter when somebody said, there's been a huge earthquake in Christchurch, and pictures of buildings that were just smoking rubble started flooding onto the web.
So I found out about it through Twitter and jumped onto the Skype conversation that was happening, and immediately found myself in the thick of it, realised there were some gaps in the organisation of what was going on, some things that needed to be done, stepped forward and did them.
We have a team at work who look after the stuff.co.nz website. Traffic to that went up about 10 to 15 times just in a matter of minutes.
The communications lines to Christchurch, they were severed pretty much. I mean, even the paper, the press was pretty much taken out, EQNZ2, TV3, which is doing fantastic work, just more or less by accident because it survived. So it's been very hard to get any information as to what happened there.
There's some software called Ushahidi, which came out of the Haiti crisis, and it's been used elsewhere in the world, which basically tries to take those useful nuggets of information and put them on a map so people can find them. And it takes information in from email, SMS, Twitter, and web forms. So we can start saying, where are people able to get water from? Where are people able to spend the night? Which welfare centres are open or closed? Where the emergency trauma centres are, and that sort of thing. And so by 6 o'clock on Tuesday, there'd been a few people in New Zealand and overseas who had got together and after a bit of toing and froing, getting the system up and running at eq.org.nz. And then we started dragging in other people as well.
People wanted to do something, people wanted to help. Everybody felt powerless and impotent being on the wrong side of New Zealand when the people of Christchurch needed so much help. So we found that it was very easy to get volunteers and support. We needed volunteers for several things. We had volunteers who did technical work and kept the servers up and running. We had volunteers who filtered reports, so they filtered the things that came through in social media, emailed in reports, that kind of stuff, filtering out the chaff, finding the stuff that you wanted to keep, and then putting it onto the map.
So by sunset on Tuesday, we had Ushahidi up and running for New Zealand, for the earthquake site. We had people submitting reports through different means, and we had a team of volunteers coming through to start processing those and getting useful information out to people in Christchurch.
We learned that technology is not the answer. Technology is just a small part of the answer, and around that technology you have to put in place processes and systems for bringing people on as volunteers, showing them what has to be done to make them useful and productive. And that wasn't there when we started. We had to build it over the first couple of days that we were there.
Through the engagement of people at work, we were able to help out with certain bits of infrastructure, technology. One of the things I think is important to make clear is that just because people are volunteers doesn't mean that they're not experts. And I think this is something people miss, particularly when they look at the open source community and the software that's produced by that. It's produced by experts in their field. And people like Rob and Nigel McNee and so on are really at the top of their game. We
went through hundreds of thousands of tweets, of mailed in forms, of SMS messages. And from those we kept information on about 1,000 places, and that information would change throughout each day as new reports came in. For example, a shelter is open, now the shelter is full, don't go to the shelter anymore.
Yeah, I should say I'm very impressed by the speed at which the whole thing happened as well, and the discipline of and the company said often enough, the unpaid volunteers who have put in so many hours of their own time, their own money and effort. It's fantastic work, really is.
We had lots of great stories come out of it. People would email us telling us how we had managed to help them. It was so gratifying to get those. And they were all the things that you would expect to see in the middle of a crisis. It's a mother who was able to get infant formula at a time when she didn't know which supermarket had it. Somebody who was able to get insulin because they didn't know where to go for it. So those kinds of stories were wonderful to get.
And what the eq.org.nz lesson that I take away from it is, if you have the right people who are used to working in an agile, quick way, you can do things that are appropriate at the appropriate time. If you get bogged down in massive IT project infrastructure stuff, then you'll end up with a juggernaut heading in a direction that might end up being the wrong direction. And so, if there's one lesson to be learned from the EQ.org.nz guys, it's that, keep agile, keep loose, and be ready to change and do things appropriately.
And we always said that when it was no longer useful for those folks, we'd be happy to pack it up and go away. But so long as there are people who need this information, we're going to be there providing it for them.